Before I continue into part 2, I do want to clarify that what I'll be talking about here and what I talked about in the previous video are classroom management habits and mindsets. They would be different, or they are different from what I would call classroom management tricks or hacks. Things like using a blurt jar or using call and response signals, like if you can hear me, clap once, if you can hear me, clap twice, like those kinds of things. And those things tend to work differently for different age students. It all really depends on who's in front of you. What I'm talking about here in this series are habits and mindsets for you as a teacher that should really help your classroom management system in almost any classroom. They're the building blocks for a good classroom management system. Hello everyone, I'm Emmy. Welcome to my channel. Welcome to part 2 of Classroom Management Top 10 Habits. And without further ado, let's go ahead and dive right in. Number 6. Use non-disruptive consequences. Before I dive into the non-disruptive part though, I do want to talk about consequences in general. There's a lot of things you can say about consequences. To me, I think it's very important that consequences should fit whatever the misbehavior was. But in addition to that, whatever consequence you have should be restorative as well, where it aims to repair whatever relationship was broken by that misbehavior, and it should be a learning experience. Part of the consequence should be teaching the appropriate behavior instead of what actually transpired. So I just want to say that. Okay, so you've tried redirection and repeated warnings in class, and you still have a student that's misbehaving. And now you probably have to give out some sort of consequence or have some sort of discussion. You want to make sure that you do it in the most non-disruptive way as possible. When I've been in this situation, I usually just quietly and quickly ask the student to step outside if I'm in the middle of a lesson or a lecture or giving out instructions. And then I continue on with what I was telling the whole class, and then move them into some sort of partner activity or independent work activity where they don't necessarily need me there. And then I go and step outside with the student to have a discussion. And obviously you want to do this, like if you can't leave your class, which you know a lot of us can't, make sure you have an eye out or have the door partially open so you can, you know, pop in or have like a foot into the classroom and have a quiet discussion with the student outside. And usually I address the behavior. I ask them usually first, like, well, why do you think we're out here? And they tell me, or if it's just depending on your relationship with your student, maybe you already know and all you need to do is just give them a look, or you tell them this is what's happening and it's not okay. If it continues to happen, you're gonna have a demerit home by the end of class, or some other consequence that you have in your classroom or your school, whatever that may be. And then usually welcome them back into the classroom. On rare occasions, things might still not improve and you're going to need to actually give out a consequence, whether that's a demerit or a phone call home, detention, whatever you have in your classroom or in your school. When you have to give out that consequence, you want to make sure that you give it out as privately as possible. Usually what I do is I have a discussion with the student at the end of class and give the consequence then and tell them the reason why, or maybe it's a discussion, right? But you have to give out the consequence. On rare occasions, again, on rare occasions, very rarely, sometimes the offense is really public and really blatant. And first of all, maybe for those kinds of misbehavior, like maybe bullying, public bullying, or blatant disrespect, blatant public disrespect of anyone in the classroom, including yourself or any student, then the consequence needs to be quick, firm, and public, right? Because it sends the message of this is not okay, because this behavior is causing discomfort, or it's making other people in the classroom feel unsafe, and it just cannot continue and cannot be tolerated. Okay, so there are those instances when that has to happen, but most of the time you should really try to give the consequence as non-disruptively as possible and as privately as possible. I think it gives that student more of a chance to repair whatever relationship was damaged or correct that behavior, and they don't have that stigma of, oh, that's the bad kid. So I think that's why it's very important. Number 7, be consistent and always follow through. Say only what you mean and always follow through. If you say that a particular behavior or misbehavior is going to have a particular consequence, then it better every time, no matter how many times it happens and no matter who is doing it. Okay? One of the best and quickest ways to lose your students' respect and to break down the relationship between you and them is lack of consistency. If you find yourself exhausted or constantly putting out fires, then that means it's time to step back and really look at what your priorities are. Don't start battles you can't win, okay? Don't start battles you can't win. Take a step back and reflect on possible root causes of whatever the misbehaviors are or what's going on in your class, and really look at that. Have a discussion with the students if you need to. Just really make sure whatever you're addressing in class, make sure that they're consistent with what your top priorities are. Because sometimes you'll also just have seasons or times, like phases, where the kids are just squirrely and it's like a losing battle sometimes to just fight every single side conversation or blurt. Like it's sometimes not possible or realistic to do, and it will just leave you drained and exhausted. And to save your sanity, it's just really important to always step back and reflect and think about the battles you're fighting and which ones you're losing and which ones you're actually winning at. Okay, try not to do those things that are going to lead you down the path of failure or just constantly repeating yourself, because that also breaks down the relationship between you and your students. You're going to feel tired and resentful, and they might lose respect for you and see that resentment. The kids can feel that, right? But also just it's a breakdown in your authority, because then you start becoming ineffective and the students will see that. Just remember, when it gets to that point of there's just too much and it's too hard to be consistent, it's okay to reset. The problem could be in your class culture or routine. Something might have gone off track and you need to reset that, and that's okay. And if you need to do this several times throughout the year, that's fine. Do it for however many times you need to. The time you take to do that will save you so much sanity and so much time in the future. Whatever you do, just don't give up on consistency. Like, take a step back and make sure you can reset and get to a place where you can be consistent again. Consistency is just very important when it comes to classroom management. It takes a lot of hard work, but it's just very important in building respect and running your classroom smoothly. Sometimes, even with good procedures, well-timed lessons, meaningful tasks, you'll still have some students who will need extra motivation on some days. And when it comes to that, I try to have a variety of rewards to balance out the consequences and to give them extra motivation. I try to make these rewards simple, non-disruptive, and immediate. So your rewards can be as easy as offering free time or a game during the last few minutes of class if your whole class is having a hard time completing a particular task. I've also done things like free homework pass or a free quiz question, just depending on the assignment. I like to try to make the reward fitting of the behavior of whatever I'm rewarding. But sometimes, like I said in the beginning, right, rewards, it depends on who is in front of you, who your students are. And I think you just have to make that judgment call. And there are a lot of great ideas out there for what kinds of rewards you can use. Some of them require more maintenance than others, like a prize box, tickets, etc. But those are fun things that I've also used with like my younger students, if you find that you have the energy for that. And don't forget the power of just verbal, quick, positive affirmations. Like that's also really great. Like when you say things like, oh, I noticed Susie has her notes out. You don't even have to say good job or I like this. You just say it out loud, and that works really well. And as a reward, where like other kids are motivated to do the same and do it, right? But again, those kinds of things are dependent on the students you have. It might not work if you have a particularly sarcastic or difficult class. Maybe those kinds of things, they'll just like, okay, so what? As with anything, it's very important to use moderation and constant reflection. You want to make sure you're always looking at your rewards and consequence system and see, is this still working? You want to make sure that they don't become distractions. So number 9 and 10, we're getting into mindsets. Number 9, always constantly reflect and learn. Take a few minutes at the end of each day to just think about how your classes went. Like what went well, what went wrong, especially if things really feel draining, right? That's a good sign. That's usually a good sign that maybe you need to step back and reflect on your classroom management if you're putting out a lot of fires when you get to that stage. You want to ask yourself questions like, well, was that lesson too long? Was it too hard, too easy? Is it just a couple of students that are struggling and they're affecting the whole class? Do you need a new seating chart? Was the lesson too unstructured and too long? So you want to constantly ask yourself those questions. Remember, kids react differently when routine is broken or things don't go like they normally do. Don't be afraid to ask a mentor or a trusted colleague to come into your classroom and observe you and give you some pointers. Sometimes it's really helpful to have that outside perspective come in, and it helps you to see things that is hard to see when you've been in the action for so long. So again, just constantly reflect and learn. Be open to learning. Have that growth mindset. If things are going bad, don't just say, oh, I just suck at teaching. It's just going to make you more resentful and just give up, right? Just think of it like these things aren't working right now. I need to figure it out and it will get better. I can get better. Okay, you always can. Okay, if it's something you want to do, you're motivated to overcome these obstacles, you can. Okay, just to have that mindset. Things will get better. You can grow and change things. Your students can grow and change. So just have that growth mindset, and so it'll help you reflect with more energy and eagerness and just be in that mode of constantly learning. And finally, number 10, be kind to yourself. Okay, be kind to yourself. Classroom management is a really difficult thing. Even some veteran teachers will continue to have a hard time with it. And actually, many veteran teachers will continue to have a hard time with it. Remember, your students, who you're dealing with humans with complex emotions, and they change. They're not always the same. And likewise with you, right? Things are ever changing, and don't give yourself a hard time when things are going wrong. Prioritize your mental health, your well-being, when it comes to this. Managing a whole class made of individuals is not an exact science. There's so much that goes into it. So you really have to be patient and allow yourself to reset and step back. Try to start fresh every day and don't take things personally. And what I found is if you try to really be intentional with having a positive attitude and mindset, that goes such a long way. When you let the things bog you down and you start becoming really pessimistic and having a negative point of view of yourself and your student, it just comes out so much and it exacerbates the situation. So make sure you can find ways to relax and rejuvenate outside of the classroom and surround yourself with positive people and just be very intentional in being positive, not taking things that happen in the classroom personally, okay? And understanding that whoever you're dealing with, they're flawed human beings, and having patience for that. And another really important reason why you want to prioritize rest and well-being, your well-being, it's not just for you, it's for your students too, okay? It's very important that you give your most rested, happy self to your students, because it's what's going to help them, and they'll also see from your example. The more rested and balanced you are each day, the better you can help your students. So that does it for Classroom Management Top 10 Habits. I hope this has been helpful to you. And if you have any classroom management habits that you found has really worked really well for you, please leave them in the comments down below and share them with us. Thank you so much for staying. I hope you're having a great week, and I will see you in the next video.